All right, welcome everybody to our annual disability panel featuring employers and employees. We are so excited to have you today. This is brought to you by the Career Development Center and CSULB. We have 2 employees as well as 2 employers. You can see their titles here and where they are associated with. We apologize, we do not have their names on there, but hopefully you can see our the friendly faces here and associate. This is really exciting. This is the second time we have done this, and we're really kind of making a push to do this every single year annually. We are here to celebrate ending National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And this is something that's near and dear to us as the Workability 4 program here on campus at CSULB, because as some of you know, because we do work with some of you here, some familiar faces, we work really hard to support you and your career journey and your career prep. And this is just one of these little bonus things that we do to highlight that. And it's really special today to have 2 employees who identify with disability to kind of share their experiences, as well as 2 employers, as you can see, that are going to share what they do in their work to support and spotlight disability awareness, advocacy, allyship, etc. I will introduce myself. I am Nakia Pinnell, the Workability 4 coordinator here on campus. I am in the CDC, also known as the Career Development Center here at Brotman Hall. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. I'm going to pass it off to Amanda Torres.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. I am also part of the Workability 4 team. I am the Workability 4 specialist, and I also work at the Career Development Center, and I am happy to be here with you all today. Let's introduce our employers first, and then we can do our professionals after. So whoever wants to start, just quick intro.
For employers first?
Employers first, yes.
Great. Let's start with Carrie.
Hi, everybody. Really excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Carrie Carmichael. I am a senior recruiter for the Peace Corps, and I'm based here in Southern California. So my job is to recruit qualified and interested candidates to serve in the Peace Corps, which I'll talk to you a little more about. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to pass that off to Jem.
Yeah. Hi, thank you so much for having me today. My name's Jem. I am the talent manager at Equitas Academy Charter Schools. We're a system of charter schools in downtown LA. We have 6 schools, and I work with all of our talent functions for all 6 of our schools and our network office, recruiting our instructional talent and working on retention and ensuring that everyone has a positive place to work.
Thank you. All right. Hand it off to employees. I'm going to start with Lindsay.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay and I currently work in the Bob Murphy Access Center as the instructional materials and technology consultant, which means that I am here to check documents and other materials so that they're accessible to our students who are blind or low vision. And then in addition to that, as there are many students on the call, I'm also a student at San Francisco State pursuing my master's and credential to teach students who are blind or low vision.
Great. And Lindsay, can you introduce your special guest?
Oh yeah, under my desk, I have my guide dog, Eve, who helps me navigate campus.
Thank you, Lindsay. And then I'll hand it off to Allie.
Hi, I'm Allie Gableman. I'm a financial coach. So what that means is I work with people to help them budget and build a spending plan, pay off debt, and I educate them about investing as well. I have a lot of experience as being an employee, but I am currently working for myself as an entrepreneur. So I can kind of speak from both ends.
Thank you. Okay, just a reminder, everyone, this is being recorded. If you would like to change your name, you may in the little, the thing where your name is. So with that, you are more than welcome to do that as well. I do have captions enabled. If you need any assistive tech to be in place or accommodations, feel free to use it. Otter AI, Glean, etc. And then with that as well, if you have any questions or comments in the chat, please put them in there. If you are a student, please send Amanda Torres your ID. The same if you are a staff or faculty member. This way we can keep attendance as well. And then for those of you that are staff or faculty, I'm sure that you are not, I'm sorry. I am a career advocate as well. I am on the committee for that at the Career Development Center. We will have a slide next for you to take your attendance. So that will be next. Amanda, can you share that?
Can you see it?
So if you are staff or faculty only, and you are here for a career advocate, please scan this. Students, you don't need to do that. Other committee members, you do not need to do that because we do have one here today. Great. Give everybody a moment for that. And if you do need this later on, you can email me or Amanda, or you can email Mary Nguyen, who is on the Career Advocate Committee as well, and she will support you with that attendance, so we can keep track of it. Okay. We will start with our employers, and I will hand this off to Amanda.
All right, let me stop sharing my screen so I have full access to my computer really quick. Let me see. Oop. Okay. So my first question is for Carrie. I see that you have a disability section on your website concerning volunteers with disabilities. Can you tell us more about this program and any new initiatives to include inclusivity? How would someone with a disability be included in this program?
Thank you for that question. So I kind of have to go back a little bit and maybe explain a little more about what Peace Corps is. That Peace Corps, we're a U.S. federal government agency. We send volunteers abroad to work in areas of international peace and friendship. And we have been around since 1961, founded by John F. Kennedy. And really the idea behind Peace Corps is not only a volunteer exchanging knowledge, we're all about technical exchange of knowledge. So the volunteers sharing their life experience, maybe what they've learned in academics at Cal State Long Beach, how they can impart some wisdom in a community, and then receiving that in return. And two of the three goals, that first goal of Peace Corps is that technical exchange of knowledge. The other two is that intercultural exchange. And so that the second goal is the volunteers sharing their unique experience, American experience, in the country where they're serving. So sharing their identity. And so what we do at Peace Corps, the idea is we want our pool of volunteers that work abroad. We're currently about 2,000 volunteers that work in over 50 different countries in the global South around the world. And we want our volunteers to reflect the diversity of the United States. So that's the idea. And Americans with disabilities is one of those diversity groups that we actively recruit, because they are a very big reflection of Americans. So, and so they're just as important. We have a diversity, I could name all the diversity groups. We have the over 50 groups, veterans groups, the LGBTQ population, different ethnic groups, and also people with disabilities. And I think I just wanted to point one thing out. The Peace Corps Act, which is what made the Peace Corps a federal government agency way back in 1961, has been changed a little bit through the years. But I just wanted to read something which I think is really interesting in the Peace Corps Act. It says, Peace Corps shall be administered to give particular attention to the programs, projects, and activities which tend to integrate disabled people into the national economies of developing countries, thus improving their status and assisting the total developmental effort. So, so that's what we're all about in Peace Corps, and folks with disabilities are front and center in part of the groups that we recruit to. So and it's kind of Peace Corps is interesting because we work in so many different countries, and as you might imagine, there's a lot of countries don't have ADA laws and all that type of stuff. So it's it's all very individual. So it would be working with a person with a disability, finding where they could fit in, where they could work, and what type of country, what type of project that they could work in with the Peace Corps. And so I'm really excited, and maybe I'm jumping the gun on some of the other questions, but we work in six very broad sectors. So we work in agriculture, we work in the environment, education, small business, youth and development, and I think I'm missing one, but so they're very broad sectors that we work in, but we're actually developing projects that are unique for people with disabilities that they can work in. And actually three examples I can think of is in the country of Kenya and Ghana, we have developed deaf education programs, so specific for Kenyans and Ghanaians who are deaf, and bringing in, recruiting deaf volunteer is a perfect type of fit. And in Colombia, we have a program also within the education sector that focuses in on working with children with physical disabilities. So we are developing programs that are really geared towards folks who have disabilities, and naturally we want to fill those volunteer positions with people who have disabilities as well as the rest of the population of the United States. So I don't know if I answered that or answered too much, but happy to be here.
Thank you, Carrie. One more note, if you are a student who is attending this for a classroom assignment, you can send me or Amanda Torres a private chat. We are keeping track of that, and we will send you afterwards the information for that. Okay, I'm gonna bounce over to Jem. All right, Jem. What is the most interesting trend that you are noticing with prospective applicants? What are the skills that you are looking for in new employees?
So this one, the trend that I'm seeing recently is really great and inspiring to me with this new generation that's been entering the workforce. I love the energy that's coming in. Everyone's been very bold, and I don't want to say like a lack of professionalism because that makes it sound bad, but it's like a more of an advocating for what they want in the hiring process and in the interviews. And they're just willing to ask for it. And I am all about it. I'm all for that. I'm all for advocating for yourself in the hiring world. But yeah, I've gotten a lot of interesting interviews come up that is like, I would never have done something like this like 10 years ago, but I am proud that it's happening. So I'm excited to see where that trend goes. In terms of things that we are looking for at Equitas in new employees, we highlight really two of our main competencies in the hiring process, and they're growth mindset and mission alignment. So Equitas's mission is to ensure that all of our scholars get access and feel supported on their way to achieving a 4-year degree at a university. We start at TK at kindergarten, and we go all the way through. Our schools currently end at middle school, but we support them after middle school and support them through high school and through the college application process. And so that mission is what drives every single thing that we do in our organization. So we look for people who also believe in that mission, who want to support all of our scholars, who really believe that this is the future of education. Because teaching a mission is a lot harder than teaching like classroom management skills. And so mission alignment and then growth mindset. At Equitas, we have a huge culture of feedback. Everyone who comes into our network, whether they're a 20-year teacher or a first-year instructional aide stepping into the classroom for the first time, they get a coach that they work with on a one-to-one basis. And so that coach kind of serves as like a mentor for them. So that coach will observe their work, offer feedback, but is also there to answer questions, to really help guide your personal development and your career development, whether it's at Equitas or beyond. So we highly rank someone who believes that there's no ceiling to hit, that they're always looking for feedback and looking for something to grow, because there's just a lot of feedback in our organization. But everything else that we might ask or look at, we have that coaching model and that system that we believe that we can train the right person to in anything, in classroom management, behavioral expectations, how to interact with a scholar who's having emotional difficulties. All of that we can train, and we have the staff to train that. So we really want to find somebody who believes in us.
Thank you. So going back to Carrie, Peace Corps is a federal employer. Can you share what this means for a prospective candidate, such as benefits, how to apply, and other details that are good to know? I believe you are muted.
I am muted, sorry about that. Thanks. Yes, so Peace Corps, we are a U.S. federal government agency. I am a federal employee. Peace Corps volunteers are not federal employees, but they work for a federal government agency. So just to get that, just so that's clear. So basically the application process is folks apply online, peacecorps.gov. We have all of our positions are online on our website, and I can pop that into the chat in a moment. I explained that we worked in those 6 different sectors. So a volunteer, a possible volunteer who's interested in Peace Corps, who wants to apply, can check out those opportunities online. They can filter by one of those sectors. They can filter by a geographical area that they're interested in serving in. So just want to make it clear that Peace Corps, we do not work here domestically in the United States. We're an international development agency, so we send our volunteers abroad. So folks will be working abroad. So right now, currently, we have a January 1st application deadline. So we have quarterly application deadlines. January 1st is the next one, and that's for departures in the summer of 2024. So just keep in mind, it takes about 6 to 9 months from the time that you would apply to when you would depart for Peace Corps. So I, as a recruiter, can assist anyone who's interested. Maybe you have some general questions or you're ready to apply. I can help you through the application process, review your resume, all that, set you up for success for the application process. So the application process is pretty streamlined. After you submit your application, you would hopefully be interviewed by a placement officer in Washington, D.C., who represents that country where you will hopefully be serving. You will have a 60 to 90-minute interview. I can prepare you for that. And then also one of the biggest hurdles of Peace Corps service for everybody is you do have to go through a medical clearance and intelligence background clearance process. We are a federal government, so there's some bureaucracy involved with serving in Peace Corps. And so the medical clearance process would be a time where you would individually discuss your particular disability. The screening nurses would be able to see that information and determine what countries you would be eligible to serve in. So we want to make sure that a country that you're going to can accommodate any type of need that you have. So and that's the most important thing about Peace Corps service. We want our volunteers to be safe and secure and be able to thrive in that community where they're serving. So so that's kind of the application process, and that's the time that there's certain countries where I think certain disabilities would be a challenge to be able to accommodate just based on that specific country. And so that's when that medical clearance is when you would have a list. Everybody gets a list of where they could be where they could serve and serve safely. So I do want to say that Peace Corps is a 2-year program. It's something that you would do after you graduate. You do need a college degree or 5 years of professional experience to be involved with Peace Corps. And the benefits of Peace Corps service is not only integrating into a new country, a new culture, so learning about that culture, learning a new language, becoming more multicultural yourself, but really getting some great field experience, that 2 years of field experience. So you're taking that degree at Cal State Long Beach and really utilizing that in the field and working to benefit a community in need abroad. So we are called volunteers, but everything is paid for. Your round trip air transportation is paid for. You get what we call a monthly stipend that pays for all of your living expenses while you're living in your site, your housing, your food, your electricity bill, your cell phone bill, all those expenses that we have here in the US. You're going to have those expenses living abroad. Peace Corps pays for all of that. You also get $10,000 upon your return when you finish your 2 years of service. You get something called a readjustment allowance that helps you to readjust to life back in the US, and that's $10,000. We also have a very robust graduate school fellows program. We have over 100 different institutions that participate around the country, over 200 different master's and PhD programs. So if you're interested in continuing your education after your Peace Corps service, it's really an awesome opportunity to get a scholarship. And these are fellowships only for returned Peace Corps volunteers. So you're not competing against the general population, but just your fellow Peace Corps volunteers. I took advantage of that program after I finished my service, got a master's degree, and that is a lifetime eligibility. And one other big perk that not a lot of people know about, if you are interested in working with the federal government and any agency of the federal government, all Peace Corps volunteers get what we call non-competitive eligibility, NCE. And that's a special hiring status in the federal government. So you have a year after you get back, after your 2 years of service, to get a job with the federal government. Is kind of a backdoor way into federal government service. It's kind of akin to veteran status. So a lot of Peace Corps volunteers take advantage of that and pursue careers with the federal government. So there's a lot of great benefits of service. I think that the biggest benefit is that individual experience that the volunteer is going to have, right? Getting some great field experience, learning a new language and a new culture. And I really think that folks with disabilities they're serving as role models in another country. And there might be some host country nationals who have never seen someone in that position, like as a Peace Corps volunteer, that may have a disability. And so that is super duper important, I think, for as I said before, for our volunteer pool to really reflect the diversity of the United States. So it's an incredible program, great professional opportunities after you get back. I always throw this out. The founder of Netflix was a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and he attributes really the tenacity of being a volunteer and learning how to maybe create something from nothing is pretty much how it is in the Peace Corps. You're not given a lot of money. We don't give a community money, but it's just you sharing your knowledge. And he attributes really his success with Netflix to his experience working in Africa in the Peace Corps. So with that, I will button my mouth. Talking too much.
Fine, thank you. We so appreciate everything. For those of you who just joined us, if you are faculty or staff, at the end of this, if you're here for career advocates, we will have a slide for that attendance. And if you are a student, I am working on that right now, but you can direct message me or Amanda Torres your ID and let us know. We are keeping track of those who are here for an attendance verification. Okay, back to Jem. What are some examples of how your company has become more diverse in the past year? What are some recent goals of your company concerning diversity?
Sure. So really, ever since the pandemic, Equitas Academy has been kind of undergoing a renaissance for the organization. We were founded back in 2009 in the Pico Union neighborhood of downtown LA. And For the first time since then, we actually have a new CEO and a fully new leadership team, including our first director of DEIA. And so that team has come in and brought a lot of fresh perspectives and really set the foundation for our next stage of growth as an organization. It's kind of like the organization as a whole has been evolving or growing up from a child to the teenager stage. So we've been doing a lot of really intentional work surrounding what it means to be like an organization in the pursuit of equity for our staff and for our scholars in the community that we serve. And so in the past year alone, we've done a lot of work in our talent acquisition processes in order to try to recruit more staff and teachers that really reflect the makeup of our community. But unfortunately, with the national teacher shortage that's happening, we know that there's always more work to be done, and there's more that we could be doing. But many of our initiatives this year are really centered around building a community of care in our organization and all of the different facets that fall under that umbrella, such as creating spaces of belonging and psychological safety and the safety to grow and learn and develop together, the same things that we hope to impart on our students that we work with. So it's all in service of the underlying goal of high performing classrooms. So I think the areas that our goals focus on for this next school year are protection from harm, connection and community, work-life harmony, mattering at work, and the opportunity for growth. And so we bring everything that we're doing and all of our day-to-day work under those buckets.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Going back to Carrie, what are some examples of how your company has become more diverse in the past year? And what are some recent goals your company may have concerning diversity?
Yeah, I kind of alluded a little bit to before about our diversity groups that we really recruit to and try to increase their participation. So we, kind of internally have a 40% goal of our population of applicants and our population of volunteers that they fit into, or that they are part of one of those 8 diversity groups that I talked about. So we are constantly working to achieve that percentage, and sometimes we fall below that. And I don't have. I was looking for some statistics in the last couple of years of what our numbers are in terms of volunteers with disabilities, and I don't have that information. I tried to get that information for today and couldn't access that information. But we're constantly, working on those numbers and upping those numbers with all diversity groups. We actually have a diversity team of recruiters and who represent different diversity groups, and they work around the country in really focusing in on diverse populations. And so maybe focusing on HBCUs, working on focusing on folks with disabilities. I'm not one of the diversity recruiters, but we have a team that is primarily based in Washington, D.C., but some are throughout the United States. So having a diversity recruiters, I think, is very important, and that's something that's been relatively recent in Peace Corps. And then also what I mentioned before is really expanding our programs, our opportunities for volunteers to not, I use that example of the education sector. We're not just teaching English or basic science or basic math, but we have integrated deaf education and working with youth with disabilities, so physical disabilities. So in that way, we're expanding our opportunities abroad for volunteers to contribute. So that's something that we've been working on in the last couple of years.
Thank you so much, Carrie. All right, we're on the last question for Jim, then we'll volley back over to Carrie. This is question number 4. What has been your experience with disability in the workplace, and how have you been applying it to your everyday work? what would you like to see change or improve for yourself?
Sure. So I personally have a very negative experience with my own disability in the workplace. I have narcolepsy and I've struggled with it my whole life, but I was undiagnosed until I was 25 years old, and already like in pursuit of my career. And before then, in my workplaces, I would fall asleep in the middle of important meetings with chiefs or be passed on for opportunities. I was late because I was falling asleep on my commute and had to pull over. And I just generally wasn't really doing a great job because I was struggling to be there and struggling to focus. But after finally like figuring out that it wasn't just me, I was able to get medication, which helps support and treat some of my symptoms, and my life changed for the better. But just because I'm in treatment doesn't mean it goes away. So there are like bad days and good days. Before I was at my current role that I'm at, the previous position I had, I was actually put on a performance improvement plan that was directly related to something associated with my disability, which at the time I hadn't been upfront about. I was still getting used to what it was like living with it and acknowledging it. And so I was given a negative review at work, and I tried to fight it. And I brought up that what they were upset about had nothing to do with my performance or my job, but it had more to do with my disabilities and the struggle that I was having. And they put me through, it was probably the most humiliating interactive process I could think of. I could go into the whole story, but ultimately I ended up getting fired before I even finished the interactive process. And it was not a great time. I'll never forget it, and I'll never forget like the feelings that they put me through. And I've been fighting ever since to advocate for diversity with dignity in the workplace and in any spaces that I can, because I never want anyone to feel that way, the way I felt in those months. But luckily for me, since I was given a chance from my current workplace, even though that I had a very short tenure on my resume from the previous job, and I've been here 4 years now. And in my work that I get to do, I'm an advocate, I think, for the voices that aren't always in the room. I push on other hiring managers to think about their biases and to evaluate some internal beliefs that they're having, or assumptions that are not based in fact, as well as just educating others on topics surrounding diversity and neurodiversity and how it appears and how it presents in our hiring process. So since I've been at Equitas, I have helped to restructure our entire hiring process. I've really wanted us to be more inclusive of all aspects of diversity and remove some of the artifacts that were in play of like white supremacist culture that really remained from like a traditional hiring process. And we've been really intentional about trying to welcome candidates from all walks of life in order to help support our scholars. And I think the second part was, what would you like to see change? Yeah. So something I would like to see change, I think in general, is that still when the popular cultural and organizational buzzwords think of DEIA work, I still find that oftentimes disability and neurodiversity are not top of mind. And I think organizational trends in general have made great strides to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, but there's still a lot of work to be done, because I still think that there's voices missing from that table and that are getting overlooked. And so I would love that change to happen, to have more voices at the top, advocating for all, because I think at the end of the day, there really isn't something, no such thing as normal. And I'd love a world where all facets of our differences are celebrated and are heard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Jim. Thank you. And then lastly, for Carrie, what are some examples of accommodations, assistive tech, accessibility, or support you offer to your disability population?
Yeah, so it's always very hard to speak holistically and globally with Peace Corps since we work in so many different countries that are so unique. So, but what I will say in general with Peace Corps is every single Peace Corps country has a Peace Corps office, has a Peace Corps staff. We have a medical team at that Peace Corps office. We have a programming team, a training team, safety and security team. So all the staff members are there to support the volunteers. So we want the volunteers to be safe and productive and healthy in carrying out their jobs. And all of those support staff that are there to support the volunteers. So some things I can think of about accessibility would be the first 3 months of your Peace Corps service in country is called Peace Corps training. So you go through a very, very intensive training period. So you're going to be trained on language, you're going to be trained on the technical skills you're going to need to carry out your position, safety and security, personal health, and cross-cultural activities and cross-cultural learning. So there's going to be a training team that is going to be there to individually support the individual need of that volunteer. So there could possibly be an additional trainer that is hired to support that volunteer, to assist them. All volunteers live with families, so all the homes are vetted for the safety and security, and so in that case, that home would be vetted and approved for any type of disability, volunteer with a disability. So those, I would say that it's more kind of individual per person that Peace Corps would work with, and so it's be more of an individualized plan, so to speak. There could be some different technologies that are utilized. Some volunteers don't have electricity or running water, and so those types of things. There could be some folks that have to have electricity to recharge some batteries or something. So that would all be taken into consideration for that individual volunteer.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate everybody's expertise and sharing, speaking about, your industry as well as your workplace and being vulnerable with us. We so appreciate it. I do see questions in the chat. For those questions, we will be saving toward the end. I am saving them, copying and pasting them on a separate document, and then we will open up the floor afterwards. For those of you who just joined us, if you are a student, we do have a slide at the end where you can verify attendance, if this is for a classroom assignment, etc. In the meantime, you can also direct message Amanda Torres or myself, your ID or anything like that. And we're also keeping track. If you are using any assistive technology, you are more than welcome to. In the Zoom, we are recording this as well. We will be sending out the recording and the transcript. And if you are a faculty or staff member here for Career Advocates, we do have a slide verifying that attendance as well. We will now pivot over to our employees. Also, self-employed employees. So it's all very exciting. And we're going to have a set of different questions. It's 4 as well. So I'm going to start with Allie Gateman. So, we have a special guest here. Our director of the Career Development Center just popped in. We're really excited to have her. We also have a career development counselor as well. And hi, Erin. And some familiar faces too that we work with. Great. Allie Gableman. What are some challenges with your disability and how do you navigate or manage? Did this affect you when you decided to pursue an entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I have anxiety. So some of the ways that manifests itself is I will often not be able to think clearly sometimes. Like if I'm in a moment of overwhelm and someone is talking to me, it's like I'm not really registering what they're saying necessarily. So taking notes is helpful with that, but also whenever things are recorded like this via Zoom, I often ask for permission if I can record it, which really helps reduce my anxiety too, because in the moment I'm less nervous about like trying to capture every little detail because I know I have that recording that I can go back to. So that's one challenge in a way that I manage it. But other challenges is it could cause like digestive issues for me, or racing heart, or dizziness. And so managing that is really a constant practice. And it's something that I am continuing to work on. Definitely have not fully mastered that. I don't know if I ever will, but it will include things like going for walks. So if I have a busy day, I try to like schedule in breaks where I can go for a walk, or like you can see the plants I have behind me. I'm really into indoor plants, outdoor gardening. It's amazing how just like 10 minutes of focusing on something like that, that's not looking at a screen or work related, can really reduce my anxiety level as well. And even things like projects around the house. I recently repainted my fireplace. That is just, time where I can kind of like get in the zone, focus on something. And even though I did that on a weekend, it kind of set me in a more clear mental state for the work days that followed. And then things like reading as well, just like relaxing activities really help me on an ongoing basis manage it a little bit more. But more situational type anxiety, like preparing for a big presentation or a job interview, things like that, I just prepare for. That's how that also helps me reduce my anxiety. So that could be like for this presentation, for example, I jotted down a bunch of thoughts just in like bulleted format so that if I ever get nervous, I can glance over at my notes. And even when I do in-person interviews, I do the same thing. A lot of times I'd never look at those notes, but just knowing they're there in case I have this like freeze up type moment is really just comforting and helpful. So that's something, those are some challenges I have and ways that I work through it. And the other part of your question was, did this affect me when I pursued entrepreneurship? And yes, it made entrepreneurship made managing my anxiety harder and easier in different ways. So it made it harder because it's easier to avoid tasks you don't want to do when you are your own boss, right? Like you can just neglect things that need to be done a little bit easier when you don't have a boss like bothering you about it. Like, hey, did you do X, Y, and Z? So that's an example of where my anxiety made entrepreneurship a little bit harder. Another example is entrepreneurship is a higher pressure environment, not necessarily day to day, but in the long term. Because, for example, if you don't make a sale, then you're not getting paid. As opposed to when you're a W-2 employee, kind of no matter how it goes, like you're still going to get your routine paycheck, right? And so that has increased my anxiety and made me need to like do these types of coping mechanisms and activities to release stress more often than I used to when I was a W-2 employee. But some ways that entrepreneurship has helped my anxiety and made it a little bit easier is that I'm able to create my own schedule. So I do things like make sure I only have like one big event per day. I meet with clients one-on-one. And so I make sure that I only have, so many sessions per week, for example, with my one-on-one clients, or so many podcast interviews, whatever it is. I just make sure that the week as a whole isn't too crowded, too overwhelming, which is a lot easier to do when you work for yourself. It's not impossible as an employee though, too, because you just need to communicate more with your supervisor. Like, hey, I have 5 things this upcoming week. It would really help reduce my anxiety if this 5th thing got moved to the next week, for example. That's an example conversation you could have with your employer. But obviously, as an entrepreneur, you can just move things yourself. I can also do things like just give myself a longer lunch break, which is also something you could ask for from your employer. But a longer lunch break allows me to eat and then like go for a neighborhood walk, for example, because I work remotely, I work from home. So things like that help me reduce my anxiety. And yeah, that's pretty much how entrepreneurship is both easier and harder than being an employee.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and your advice. For Lindsay, what assistive tech do you use, and what would you envision for future tech and assistance?
Yeah, so I feel like I use a lot of different assistive technology. It really depends on the situation. So for this particular meeting, I'm using JAWS, or Job Access with Speech, on my computer, which allows me to hear all of the written text on my screen. And then I also use a similar software called VoiceOver on any Apple products, which, like I said, it does the same thing. And then I also use a video magnifier, which basically enlarges any text that's given to me. So when it comes to doing my timesheet, I use the video magnifier to look at our payroll calendar to ensure that I'm marking the right boxes so that I get paid for the right days. And then I also use Braille to access any notes or other like notes that I take in meetings, so that I can do that discreetly. And then I also use very similar tools in my education. So it's also really helped that all the technology that I'm using now, I've either used in my education or currently do, and so it's an easy transition. Thankfully, working for the university, it was already given to me because the role that I'm filling means that I have to check documents for accessibility using these technologies. So we already had them available. In some employment settings, you may have to use HR or otherwise to get this technology put in place so that you can do your job effectively.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. All right, back to Allie. Your past and current employment required several demanding degrees and high-level work. What did you do to manage this? And anything else you'd like to add to that as well?
Yeah, well, I was not diagnosed with anxiety until 2019. But I graduated with my degrees in 2012 and 2013. And then I took a very stressful CPA exam in 2013 and 2014. So I just provide those dates to share that I went through some pretty stressful times without knowing that I had anxiety. And it's kind of funny because in hindsight, it's extremely obvious. Because, for example, ways that I was, or signs that I was not properly managing my anxiety is that when I was stressed about final exams or the CPA exam or something, my whole body would break out into hives, or I would get cold sores or things like that. And so those are examples of me kind of surviving through stressful periods without really knowing that it was like above and beyond stress, that it was actually like I should have been diagnosed with anxiety. But now that I know that I have anxiety, how I get through some demanding or stressful, challenging times is I really prepare beforehand, like I had already shared. So sometimes I may over prepare, but that's just the way that I get comfortable with the situation. Let's see. I am looking at my notes here that I prepared. Oh, if I notice a racing heart or some other sign, I will try to squeeze in whatever I can. So that I'm also doing part-time consulting. So that is an employee type situation I'm in right now. And I may message my supervisor and just say, hey, is it okay if I take an extra long lunch break, like I already mentioned, to, I don't even have to explain to her why. She already knows I have anxiety. I just ask for the extra time. Yeah, and also boundaries help. Commuting is something that used to really give me a lot of anxiety. I live in Southern California, like probably all of you do, and the traffic is horrendous here. I used to have only a 12-mile commute that would take me like an hour to get home or longer. And after becoming a mom, I have 2 kids. That was extremely stressful to just sit in the traffic. So I now have a boundary in place where I will only work remotely. Maybe I will occasionally go into the office or something like that. But even if I do that, then I say I'm going to leave at 3 p.m. to avoid rush hour. So that's another thing that's really helped me, because that commute in particular used to lead up to some anxiety attacks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Back to Lindsay. Can you share your process on how you were able to qualify for a service animal? And can you share what Eve supports you with at work and every day?
As she makes noise. Um, yeah, so my process was long. I will admit that. So I applied for a guide dog from a different organization from where I got her from when I was 16, shortly after I lost a lot of vision. And unfortunately, because I am a person living with multiple disabilities, that particular organization didn't really know how to help me and basically said they couldn't help me. And so I didn't see myself using a guide dog ever. It wasn't until I had a student on my caseload here who has a guide dog as well. And she basically said to me, she goes, why don't you contact Guiding Eyes for the Blind? Because they have a program called Specialized Training for people who have mobility impairments and visual impairments, and they might be able to help you. And I was like, okay. And I kept meeting with this student over almost a year. And in those meetings, I would share with her some of the challenges I was facing, just doing simple things of crossing streets. And she said, okay, I'm going to give you our guide dog mobility instructor's information that serves our area, and just explain to her, what you're facing and, what your concerns are, and see if she thinks they'll be able to help you. And so that's what I did. And she said, yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't help you. But I still was on the fence. And so I waited until about April of 2022, and I finally applied. And because my name was already known to this guide dog mobility instructor when she was going to be coming into my area in June of that year, she gave me a call and was like, hey, do you have availability so we can meet and do your home interview, which is part of the process? And I was like, sure. And so she did the home interview, and that checked out fine. And also during the home interview, we did what they call a Juno walk, which is where, as you often see guide dogs, they wear a harness. And so Juno walks are basically where the trainer or guide dog mobility instructor will hold the end of the harness where the dog would be. And then I hold the harness handle to then be able to feel the movements that a dog would provide. And so I did that with my home interview, and she basically was like, yeah, this is great. And she put my name through. And so by end of July of last year, I had an acceptance. But I was quoted 12 to 14 months. And so I knew I was going to have to wait a year. And then we fast forward to this year, and a year to the day that I got the email that I was accepted, we graduated together and flew home from JFK to LAX. And that was the roughest flight of my life. But once I got off that plane, we hit the ground running, and we've already taken 5 flights together since then. And so she helps in navigating crowds of people, navigating through different obstacles. One of my favorite obstacles that my guide dog was able to get me around was an earth mover. Shortly before the semester began, I don't know what they were working on, but there was an earth mover that just had to drive through the quad, and she was like, nope, we're going to go left because I'm not getting hit. And so that's basically what she helps with. It's just, getting around the obstacles. Now, however odd they are, she'll get me around them. But she does have a personality, and when she knows something's not right, she'll take me in a path that I wouldn't even think to take. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Lindsay. Much appreciated. All right, we're gonna go back to Allie. So Ali, I am gonna ask a different question just because you did touch on a little bit earlier. So this question is, what are some tips you can share concerning disability disclosure? Because you did mention that you did disclose to your current contracting supervisor.
Yeah, so I can explain how I did it and how it went for me. I'm not really sure if I'm like a professional to speak on this, but I just told her as a part of the onboarding, she happens to be my former boss because I'm doing consulting for an old employer, but she was my boss before I was diagnosed. So it's interesting. But because I had that background relationship with her, I felt a little bit more comfortable to just say, oh, since I've been working with you, or since I worked for you, I've been diagnosed with anxiety. And here are some things that help me manage the anxiety so that I can be a better worker for you. So in my experience anyway, kind of phrasing it like, if I have these accommodations met, then I'll be able to show up to work better, with a more clear mind and able to perform better. That was how I kind of explained it. So examples for me and my anxiety anyway, is that I said, she initially asked if I could come into the office a few days a week. And I said, no, I need this position to be remote. However, if once in a while there are big important in-person meetings, I can be there for the meeting and then return to working from home. And then I also mentioned to her that occasionally I would like to be able to request longer lunch break. So she has been great, and she just doesn't schedule meetings around lunchtime so that it's not a big deal in case I ever need to ask for an extra long break to kind of eat and emotionally recover. So did that answer your question?
Yes, completely. Thank you. I know a lot of people here struggle with that disclosure and self-advocacy. So thank you so much. The next question we are going to ask to both Lindsay and Ali. Go ahead, Amanda.
Did both of them, for the closing question, is this the one you're referring to?
The common misconception one.
Gotcha. All right. So what are common misconceptions people have, and how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively?
Okay, so that
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's for Lindsay and then for
Okay.
Yeah, so as it relates to Eve, and me having a guide dog, if you are someone who can see on this call, you may see that I'm wearing glasses. They help somewhat, but they don't help a lot. And so a lot of people, when they see a guide dog and someone with a visual impairment walking with one, they assume totally blind. And that's not always the case. I would say about more than half of my class, my guide dog class, we all had some vision. And one way that our trainers combated that was, they gave us exercises in which we had to work under blindfold in some cases, which for me was really helpful because I have no night vision. And so that really helped me to realize, how I can rely on her in those situations. And then as it relates to employment, that regardless of visual impairment, there are ways to adapt. Going into the education space, a lot of school systems are not sure how they're going to adapt for a teacher who may be blind or low vision, especially within my field where we commute from student to student, and we living in the LA area, we have transportation or public transportation, but it's not as widely usable as it may be in, say, states like New York or otherwise. And so, just knowing and explaining that there are services like Uber, there are services like paratransit, buses, etc., and we can get from student to student, or requesting that we have a driver that helps get us from student to student is really important, and something that I'm currently navigating through as I'm almost done with grad school and have to figure out the whole student teaching process.
Thank you, Lindsay. Over to Allie, some questions.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so some common misconceptions concerning anxiety. I think a lot of people see it and I know this from my previous corporate experience and before I was diagnosed, just overhearing conversations about it, other people who had anxiety, is that people who don't properly understand it, view it as kind of like a weakness, or I think a lot of people see it as a way to avoid certain situations, like maybe a way to avoid a certain workload, or get away with a longer lunch or something like that. And so that's a big misconception, I would think, or just that they're overreacting to a situation, where really if a person is stressed in a particular moment, that struggles with anxiety, it's that might have just been like a final straw type moment. It might not have to do with the particular task that was maybe added to their plate or something. And so some thoughts around how we can combat these misconceptions is, if you're ever in a conversation where people are talking about others with a disability in kind of a negative way, then even if it's not a disability you happen to have, just, advocating for the broader group, that letting people know that you don't really appreciate that type of conversation, you don't really appreciate that comment, or you don't think it's true. I think the more people that do that in spaces, and especially if people in leadership type roles do that, or managers do that, then it really kind of sets the tone that it's a disability is something to be like respected, and the individuals who have it are to be treated with respect, and kind of set that expectation is a way that we can, as a broader society, help combat that. But on a more individual level, just communicating what you would need and what would help you be a better performer in the workplace, like I've already shared, I think is the way that you can combat it on an individual level.
Thank you, Allie. And then Jen and Carrie, I'd like to open that question to you if you would like to share anything. We could start with either of you.
Sorry, did you want to go first?
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry. Did you want to expand on that question? I didn't hear you properly.
Oh, I was wondering if Carrie wanted to go first. I was going to think on it.
Go ahead, Jim. We're here. Can't rock,
I'm
paper,
thinking
scissors.
too.
I think I have to second Allie's answer, in that the common misconceptions is that people think that we're abusing the system, or the system is being abused. But I think to combat these misconceptions is really just, if people are comfortable being open and being upfront about what they're going through, advocating for voices, active listening when voices are speaking and talking about their experience. I think that's the only way that we're going to get to the next stage of positive organizations, where people feel comfortable being themselves in the organization, is really coming at it all with an open mind, and a desire to connect, and a desire to understand others in the same space.
Carrie, feel free. Go ahead.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think it's just that exposure, and it's educating folks out there who might not understand that disability. And so I think it's really important that we have these role models who are here today to talk about their individual experiences.
Thank you so much. I like seeing the reactions here in the chat, as well as the profiles here. We have a couple of questions, but there is one last question. Again, I opened this last one to all because I thought, oh my goodness, I love hearing everybody's stories and their thoughts and your advocacy. So this one is what advice would you give prospective candidates and your best resume advice? A lot of our attendees here are looking for jobs or, you know, are interested in the career world. So I'm going to volley backwards. So I'm going to start with Lindsay.
I would say, use the Career Center's advice on how to write your resume. I know I've rewritten mine, I want to say about 3 times now. And I didn't use CSULB's Career Center, but I definitely used San Francisco State's. And they have given me really good tips on how to expand my resume, especially because in my almost 10 years of being in the working world, I've done a lot of public speaking, similar to what I'm doing today. And I forget to put that on my resume and how valuable it is to an employer. So, if you have that experience, add it, because you never know what the prospective employer could be looking for.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to go to Allie.
Yeah, I would say when Lindsay mentioned that she has had several revisions of her resume, I'm like 12 years into my career now, and I completely am, updating my resume whenever I'm looking for new opportunities, or even just as I exit and end certain opportunities. You just want to keep it up to date and fresh. And both in like paper format and on LinkedIn as well. And if you might also be surprised how interested people could be in your hobbies. So that could be something that you touch on in your resume. I wouldn't let it be like an overpowering part if it's not related. But for example, I used to work in accounting. That's what my part-time consulting job is too. But I work in a more like corporate accounting. But my interest has always been in personal finance, and that's where my I started my company, my financial company with, and just starting kind of blogging about it, sharing my podcast guest appearances and things, and that what initially started out as a hobby and has turned into a business, sharing that people really connect over that too. So yeah, you might have a hobby that people can connect over, or even sharing your disability could be something that people connect over too.
Thank you, Allie. I'm going to softball to Carrie, and we will end with Jim.
Yeah, in Peace Corps, we value non-paid work as much as we do paid work. So any type of volunteer experience you have, especially if it's relevant to the type of position that you're applying to, you definitely want to include that. Any internship work, we value that as just as much. So you may have done quite a bit of volunteer work in high school. Hopefully at Cal State Long Beach, you're still engaged in the community and volunteering. So I think that information is really important to include in your resume. And I also think that, coming right out of undergrad, you're not going to have a ton of life experience just due to your age. And I think it's important that if you're applying to a position that maybe you don't quite have that skill set, we encourage folks to include relevant coursework. Maybe there's some work that you've done in your degree that really aligns with that type of position that you're applying to. So just so include that and kind of tease that degree that you're getting in, and just include some real relevant 5 or 10 different courses that you think are very that relatable to the position that you're applying to.
And for me, some advice, I think it's important to advocate for yourself throughout the entire hiring process. You can't automatically expect someone to be in your corner. And as much as we want the workplace to be this inclusive, welcoming place, not everyone's really there yet. So the only person that's going to always be there for you is you. In the process, ask thoughtful questions, do your research on the company, be curious. know what you're applying for, scan the job description before you have a phone interview or anything like that. Jot down some notes to have on the side. Think of some questions in advance, or my advice always for people going into like the phone screen stage is to think of some things in your past experience or in your classes that could generally apply to any of the standard interview questions. Have a list of like 3 scenarios that you have ready to go if they ask those questions, and you can figure out how to apply it to whatever they ask. Some resume advice, this might be non-conventional, but like if it doesn't fit with you or who you are, your industry, I think throw some of the antiquated advice out the window. I personally don't believe in the 1-page rule. I don't think anyone can be summarized into 1 page. I want to see who you are and what you care about and where your passion lies. So in your resume, demonstrate your strengths, show some things that you've done. And if you have the data, measurable means throwing some of the data on there. I know I love to see some data and finished projects included. Highlight your wins. Brag a little bit about yourself, which is something that I personally struggle with. But if you don't showcase yourself, no one else will.
Wonderful. Thank you. We are here till 12:30. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat. In the meantime, I will be putting our guests' bios in chat. So I will give everybody a moment if you want to type a question. I did see a nice thoughtful thank you for somebody who did have to leave. So panelists, please feel free to peruse those. And while I'm copying and pasting these, again, feel free. I do have one question I'm holding for just a moment while I paste these in here. But please, guests, if you do have a question or anything you'd like to share or say, please put so in the chat. And remember, this is being recorded, and I will be sending it to you. One more. Okay. One of the questions I had earlier was from Kaya. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. Kaya says they are a transfer student, and I have a disability and a hard time focusing in school. I've gone on with some unhealthy encounters. It was stressful for me. My question is there advice and resources to help people with mental health and disability? I will step in a little bit just because that is my field and what we do here at CSULB. Of course, there's BMAC, which is represented here. There is CAPS, the counseling and psychological services here on campus. There is also student health services as well. I personally have a list of resources for off-campus and on-campus support. Although me and Amanda do focus on work and career, one of the bonuses with Workability is we also help pinpoint support as well and get you some services. So I'll just touch on that. If anybody else would like to chime in from the panelists, please feel free for that question. And again, that question is there advice and resources to help people with mental health and disability? And that is a-okay if you are unsure.
I think we can just move on to the next question. So another question in the chat, how do you share with potential employers gaps in employment as a result of health complications? If anyone has anything to add to that from our panelists.
I can jump in there. I think since the pandemic, at least in my industry, I can't speak for all, people are approaching gaps in employment with a lot more grace than they were prior to the pandemic. It's hopefully the trend continues, but I feel like people have been taking a lot more of a human approach to the hiring process, in that we understand that we've all been through this life-changing disaster, really. And we're trying to some of us are still trying to put the pieces back together. So there are now I think hopefully people are approaching with more empathy when they're reviewing resumes. I know my organization does, but if you do have that gap in your employment or things that might look poorly on the outside, like I know I had a really short tenure of employment from the job that I had gotten fired from. I personally, I don't know if this is a common thing to do, but I personally try to explain it away in my cover letter. I explain like why this happened, but I also explain, I don't know, for my gap in employment, I wasn't putting down my previous employer. I explained that there were differences, and I've highlighted my own growth and how I'm moving forward from that. But I know people are going to still judge from the first glance, but you can try to, I don't know, explain it yourself to get ahead of it.
Yeah, I would second what Jem said. I would put it, explain it in a, in a most professional but clear way that you can in the cover letter. I think that's the appropriate spot for it. Also, I think employers do kind of show their true colors sometimes during the hiring process. So if you are, being overlooked just because of a gap in your resume from a particular employer, then it might not be a good fit because they might not be the most compassionate employer to begin with. Sometimes there's exceptions, like it could just be the recruiter compared to like your future boss, but it's still kind of a sign of what they expect. So I wouldn't necessarily, you could be dodging a bullet by being overlooked by some of those employers too.
Thank you so much. We have another question. When in the hiring process do you typically recommend disclosure? I will jump in a little bit on that. That is something we also do at Workability. Disclosure is a very personal thing. It is very, very personal. You have all the right to disclose or not disclose. I always recommend, personally, I waited about a year because that's when I was most comfortable disclosing, because I wanted to see kind of how everything worked and how everybody was, etc., and just kind of feel. So that was me personally. And typically you can say, I do have a disability. You actually don't even have to say what it is. It's really up to you. And then you always want to make sure you follow up that everybody has the right paperwork in place. Everybody's, listening to you. And if you start to get an inkling of like, this isn't right, kind of like what Ali had mentioned, that the employer's not vibing with you well, or your supervisor, etc., that is when you really need to kind of sit down and think about that and go, okay, what are my next, steps and plans? But that is something we do here at Workability. But I'd love to hear from our panelists. When in the hiring process do you typically recommend disclosure?
This is Lindsay. I think for me, it's kind of obvious and hard to hide when you have a black dog that's at your left hip 24/7. So yeah, that disclosure. But I mean, it took me a little while, especially in my current employment, to figure out what accommodations I needed as a result of that. One accommodation that I kind of overlooked in needing was a one-handed brailler, because my additional disability has to do with my hands. I do use a one-handed brailler, and I didn't see the need for one until about a year and a half in, when I had a student who was taking a math class and I had to proofread her material. And then I realized, well, I need the brailler too. And so that's when I had to go through HR and have them provide that particular accommodation. But, after that was done, it took about a month and they got me what I needed.
Yeah, for me, since mine is more hidden, I shared it, like I mentioned already, with my just starting my new part-time consulting position. I mentioned it when, like, as soon as it was relevant. So in the example I gave, she asked how many days a week I could come in the office, and I said none, as I already shared. But I explained why. So for me, I wasn't necessarily planning on sharing that in that early discussion, but I also wanted to be clear with her as to why. So I think, like Nikki already shared, everyone's going to have a different stage of when they're comfortable. But for me, it was as soon as it was relevant is when I brought it up.
Yeah, for
Go
Peace
ahead.
Corps, for Peace Corps, it's a little interesting. I mean, there's the interview stage, and that would just be up to the individual how they feel comfortable in disclosing, but definitely wouldn't be definitely not a mandatory thing. The only thing it is mandatory once you go through the medical screening process. So that would be a mandatory thing for Peace Corps, but we're kind of an outlier in terms of regular employers, but that's how it would work. But no, nothing that would have to be disclosed during really during the interview process.
Jen, did you want to add anything? I don't want to put you on the spot there.
Yeah, I agree that there's no blanket recommendation on when you have to disclose. I personally didn't bring it up in the interview process, but when I was hired, I did bring it up right away because I wanted to make sure I had the accommodations that I needed to be my best self at work.
I think that's a great way to say it. It is 12:25, and I want to thank everybody. And we did have a question in the chat of, is there, if you're comfortable for our panelists, a way to reach you? I did put your bios in the chat, but if you'd like to share an email, a LinkedIn, whatever you would like to do, please feel free. I'm going to put my own in here. And in this meantime, Amanda, can you share the screen with our attendance verification and our career advocates? But please, panelists, please feel free to add that information. Great.
Give me one moment.
Great. We're seeing emails. Great. Great. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Emily. This is for attendance. Some of you have already given me your information. So if you need this, go ahead and screenshot this or take a picture. This is for students.
This is, yeah, for students for class assignments. If you do need that verification, please use this. And then we'll just give you a moment so then we can bring up the career advocate slide again. And then that pretty much concludes this, though.
I'd like to keep panelists on for just a few
Yes.
moments afterwards, but I am seeing lots of things. Okay. I'm gonna copy paste Jen's. And then Amanda, can you do the career advocates one?
Yes.
That's just the rest of Jen's bio. Oh, look at all these thank yous. This is great. I can't thank everybody enough. Attendees, panelists, Amanda for her ability to go with the flow with me. I so appreciate everybody so much. And yes, feel free if you do need to go. It's absolutely fine.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. Nice meeting everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It was a nice discussion. I was happy to contribute.
Seeing some really great messages in the chat. Oh no, did Carrie? Okay. I'm gonna stop for a second.